Thanks, Joe, for the introduction, and welcome everybody. Jason Jungwirth here, along with Rhet Russell with the South Dakota Game Fish and Parks, and we're going to talk to you today about a program that we have about restoring shorelines on lakes. This is, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the South Dakota Game Fish and Parks Shoreline Restoration Program and the Pickerel Lake Shoreline Restoration Project specifically towards the end. Going to kind of start off kind of three phases to the presentation here. We're going to kind of just give a background on why we started the program. Then we'll talk a little bit about the program specifically, and then the Pickerel Lake project, and show some examples from there. What's the importance of natural functioning shorelines? This next slide really shows kind of a twofold picture here. It shows in the forefront of the picture, it shows what a natural shoreline should look like. You know, as a wildlife and fisheries professional, we love to see these types of, you can kind of say, messy shorelines. You got the drifted in logs and snags in the front. You got stumps out in the water, emergent vegetation and shoreline vegetation. All those play a critical part into more of a natural and really healthy water body. You know, they're going to function in erosion control. They're going to help with water quality. They provide a diversity of habitat for both aquatic and wildlife species. So they have a lot of function. One of the things to note in the background is we see encroachment of cabins and homeowners inhibiting those shorelines around the lake. You can see in the backdrop, there's some homes back there, and they're wanting to have, you know, a nice manicured lawns where they can see that lake and recreate in all different forms. But what price does that come with? You get to reality, I mean, this is an extreme situation here, but it's really killing our lakes, not only from what is coming down the watershed, but also from in mid-lake. You know, you have all that runoff, erosion, all readily it can happen. So what we're trying to do with this program is we're trying to have a new developments with restored shorelines. You can see this is a good example. You know, you got some pretty expensive houses in the background, but you got this really nice native planting of vegetation that has a lot of function and value to that water body. So why should we care? Most lakes have lost up to 90% of their functioning habitats. Loss of shoreline habitat leads to highly erodible shorelines, leading to increased silt load entering the lake. The more that silt comes in and that nutrient comes in, it causes more problems, and you lose the life expectancy of your lake. Leads to several water quality problems, which is increased phosphorus levels, which leads to increased frequency intensity of algae blooms, and increased frequency of fish kills, not only in the winter, but also in the summer. When we have these pictures like the bottom right, where dead fish, we get a lot of calls. People are wondering what's going on, what happened. And anybody that sees the bottom picture on the left with the dense algae blooms, they don't want that in their water body. It's not safe to be in for humans or wildlife. This is a picture out of some data out of Minnesota. It really depicts, you know, 1 pound of phosphorus can equal 500 pounds of algae. You know, these kids look like they're enjoying their day in the water, and it might be a short-lived enjoyment, but you look at the scum in the background and the amount of algae and vegetation in there, it's not very conducive. You know, and you see that out your picture windows. It's not a place where you're going to want to be looking out onto. Here's another good example of what can happen when you're not treating your shorelines correctly. You know, it's another picture out of some data out of Minnesota, but you look at the picture in the background, you got a gentleman standing there with a dense mat of vegetation. Look at how much more shoreline they have there compared to a manicured lawn, which would be in the forefront of the picture. You get if this is on a lake where you got you're directly facing your prevailing winds, like your northeast, southeast, or southeast to northwest fetches, you're going to get a lot of shoreline erosion very rapidly and a loss of shoreline. So what do we do to try to combat that? Because one thing is using a natural native vegetation to stabilize those shorelines. And what you got here is a picture of, it really depicts the value of native vegetation. Look at on the left side of the screen, you got the red circle, that is a Kentucky bluegrass. Look at how, that's what people want. They want a nice short grass, manicured lawns, but look at the root volume down below. It's only a few inches at best that you get a root density below the soil. And you look all the way across there, any one of those other plants is a native plant that shows, most of those root densities go down to 5 feet or more, some of them over 15 feet deep in the soil. And then also look at the density of the root masses there and how much soil that most of those plants are going to hold. It's really going to hold those soils together and compact that wind and wave action and that erosion. One thing to notice with the green circle on the right side of the screen is you do have options for people that want that shorter grass in their shorelines. You have a buffalo grass, which is a warm season grass that doesn't get very tall, doesn't have to be mowed, but probably once or twice a year, and it stays not much taller, just a few inches like your Kentucky bluegrass. But look at the root depth, 7-8 feet down into the soils and the density of that root mass. So that brings us to our program specifically. South Dakota has a game fish and park shoreline restoration program. The title is kind of a mouthful, but it's a really good program that was established in the mid 2000s. It's on right now in about 10 water bodies, mainly in Northeast South Dakota. And this program actually started, we got another grant from the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership on the early inception. It was a small grant that was to look at providing showcase plots out there on a few, like 5 water bodies, around the Northeast. And to try to get this out there, we were talking to landowners about the benefits and what it is, but it's hard for them to envision actually what they're going to look like and what they're going to do to their property. So with a partnership on that grant, it helped kind of kick this program off. We're able to get a few projects out there for landowners and homeowners around lakes to see. Currently, this program is developed. We've got 30 plus projects outside of the Pickerel project, which we're going to talk about here shortly. If you factor in the number of projects with the Pickerel project, currently we have done well over 50. After we get through 2022 here, we're probably going to be over 70 projects completed. So we're starting to turn that corner, getting a lot of buy-in and a lot more expansion to other parts of South Dakota. We have a biologist that's in the same capacity as Rhet down in the southeast part of the state. He's got a couple of show plots that he's gotten established. One of them right in the city of Sioux Falls, our largest population center in South Dakota, where a lot of people can see it. It's going to start to get a lot of traction down in that part of the state as well. Kind of talk a little bit about what the process is to being able to participate in the program. First off is you want to get in contact with the Game Fish and Parks, one of our aquatic habitat and access biologists. And those contacts could come in a variety of forms. The biologist might be out working on a shoreline and talk to landowners or talking to lake associations, homeowner groups or whatever, and talk about the program. We have some other cooperation with our other programs. We have conservation officers that are out there selling programs, talking to landowners, or sportsmen and women out there on a daily basis. They can talk about the programs out there. So once we get that interest generated, then we'll get out there and do a site visit and actually look on site and talk to that homeowner. What would this project look like on their property? Kind of line out where it might be along the shoreline and that buffer strip and kind of start to talk about it. We'll talk about what plant species that are available out there. And we do have, that's kind of the neat thing with this program is we do have some limitations. We got to look at soil types, the amount of sunlight in this area, the plant availability. We generally try to go with plugs. We do have the seed option, but those are kind of the limitations, but we can kind of gear this program or each project specifically to each homeowner. Do they want a smaller, shorter stand on their plot? Like we showed, you can get on the buffalo grasses, or do you want more of a taller grasses or a mixture with different bloom types and colors in there? So there's a lot of variability. We talk about that. We do the site prep. The unique thing about this program is Game Fish and Parks, as of right now, provides all the seed and plant material and the prep material. So we'll come in and spray. We'll provide the mulch to get it going. but then the landowner has got the responsibility after that. They're responsible for helping plant, weeding, and watering. And really that weeding and watering is only a short-lived time frame. You know, when you get that first year or two to get those plants and that plot project established, native plants are very hardy and do well. So they only need a short time of that extra work. Then one other thing we like to do is, because a lot of times these are maybe only one or two projects on a water body, we just ask if that landowner would allow us to take, you know, if we have another prospective homeowner that wants to participate in the program, can we come out there and show them and maybe even visit with them and help us sell this project to get more buy-in. Just kind of another little more in depth of the design and installation side of things here. We get that outline the site. Then we're gonna kill the existing sod. We come in and spray. Most time we use a chemical application, use a glyphosate product like a Roundup or a Rodeo to kill that usually Kentucky bluegrass. In some occasions, we do have to, you know, where we can't use a chemical, we will do a covering it with a plastic or a sheet-like covering, like a tree fabric. That is a much longer time frame for that to take place. And you don't get, you know, so to speak, that instant gratification or that protection done as quickly. Once we get done with, once we have that kill done, you know, it usually takes a few weeks for that, make sure that kill is all done. Then we'll come back in, we'll edge it. And usually the department will just go in with the normal basic plastic edging. On some cases, some homeowners already have some edging or blocks or whatever around their shoreline, and they want to match this edging with that. We ask that homeowner then foots that bill for that extra edging to match their property and have that installed prior. Once we get it edged, we'll come in and place 2 to 3 inches of shredded mulch. Get the plants done, you know, as we mentioned. We select the plants based on sunlight, soil type, plant height wanted, and the bloom periods and colors, you know, depending on what that landowner wants. And then we also do have to factor in nurseries. You know, before, when we've been doing these, we get like 1 or 2 a year. So usually a nursery has more than enough plants on hand to take care of what our needs. But when we're getting into the project, like we'll talk about the Pickerel Lake, we might have, you know, a dozen or more projects in 1 year. That can really look to tap into what a nursery has available on hand. Then we have planting day, where you get the department staff will usually participate. We get the homeowners, and sometimes there's other groups that will participate as well. We'll talk about a little more coming up. Then you water, watch, grow, weed, and enjoy. Here's just another depiction of kind of a picture view of what this entails. You know, kind of looking at a section of shoreline and what it looks like. You know, starting in the number 1 in the top left corner, you got your section of shoreline delineated out. You know, it's been picture 2 is sprayed, and we've come in and fill it in, and the edging's going in. We filled in with the mulch. Then planting day. The fun thing is we got 2 pictures of plantings down on the bottom left, number 5. Sometimes it's just a small group of you know, department staff and a homeowner or whatever. But we have several instances where we get, it's an educational. We have egg programs in the schools or Cub Scout, Boy Scout type programs. They'll bring their kids out and do like a conservation lesson. So we can bring those youth out and we'll help on, we can do an educational lesson with it. Then you can see the finished plot, and then several months to a year after, you're getting a really nice, colorful native stand of native vegetation that's protecting that shoreline and providing lots of benefits. Which brings to the benefits of the program in each project. As we talked about, it's going to help in soil erosion control. Deep rooting native plants do wonders to help protect that shoreline. It's going to reduce phosphorus and other nutrients going into the water body. It's been shown that a 30-foot wide strip of a buffer can reduce up to 85% of the amount of phosphorus that goes into a water body off that property. So that's kind of our magic number we try to shoot for, but we'll work with the landowner, and sometimes they don't have 30 feet of shoreline. So we'll work with them, whatever we can get as a positive. It's providing habitat, not only for aquatic species, but for upland species as well. Pollinators, it's big, you know, you can see in the bottom picture here, there's tons of colors flowers out there for birds, bees, and butterflies. And it adds color to the landscape. And the big thing is, I think a big driver to sell for some landowners as well is less maintenance. There's no mowing, no watering. A lot of these start out as kind of weekend cabins or weekend destinations for land, homeowners. They may live in Sioux Falls, Watertown, or maybe Minnesota, Minneapolis. They're going to come in here and spend their weekends. Well, last thing they want to do is come out here and have to spend their whole time mowing or maintaining their landscape. This helps that along as well. Now turning focus specifically on Pickerel Lake and applying all this into a specific project. And we have two main objectives that we're working for with this project specifically, is we wanted to restore and enhance almost 2,600 linear feet of shoreline. And that's key, as you'll see, is coming up in a future slide of some research that's been done prior to this project. But it's roughly 10% of shoreline. There's estimated to be about 2,600 linear feet. So if we can work on getting 10% through this project protected and turned around, we're turning the curve to the right direction. Then we want to try to have at least 2 public meetings we identified that talks about the benefits of the program. And these public meetings are going to work with a few groups. We have a couple really big partners in this, the Pickerel Lake Conservancy, which was the Lake Association prior. They changed their name a number of years ago from the Lake Association to the Conservancy because they wanted to be more of a conservation focus drive. So they were using them along with the Northeast Glacial Lakes Watershed Improvement and Protection Project. That's a mouthful in itself too. But those two have been great partners to help working with landowners on this project. And then also we want to thank here as well, the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership, because we were awarded the grant to continue this project. So those are kind of our objectives that we wanted to shoot for. Where's Pickerel Lake? Pickerel Lake is located up in the northeast corner of South Dakota. So you can see in the background map in the top left is the little yellow pin. That's Pickerel Lake right up in the very northeast corner. Bottom picture kind of zooms in a little more. We talk about it's the Glacial Lakes Partnership. You can see all the water bodies dotted in there. You're right in the heart of a glaciated lakes region of South Dakota. This bottom picture here talks about the watershed, or looks at the watershed. Most of the watershed of Pickerel Lake is in South Dakota, but a little bit trickles into Minnesota. So I mentioned this Pickerel Lake is a glaciated lake. It is the deepest natural lake in South Dakota. It's about 981 surface acres, and it has a watershed of under 20,000 acres. It's not a super big watershed. Has a max depth of 41 feet and a mean depth of 15.9 feet. A couple interesting side notes that have happened since this project got started is this is a water body that's recently infested. This will be going on its 3rd year of zebra mussels, and it also has curly leaf pondweed established. It's going to make seeing the benefits of the program a little bit harder to delineate that this is, the restoration process is, the driving factor when you have the zebra mussels helping clean up the water as well. Monazare filtering. More specifically on the Pickerel Lake project, I mentioned just a little bit ago that there's been some research done here. The Pickerel Lake Conservancy and the Day County Conservation District, along with the Northeast Glacial Lakes Watershed Improvement Protection Project, did a survey around Pickerel Lake in 2016. Did a shoreline assessment. And you can see the map around the right side here shows different colors. And the next few lines in the slide here are going to delineate the color of the statement, delineates the amount of shoreline on the right side of the map. So what they found through this shoreline assessment in 2016, they drove around the shoreline and looked at how much, try to quantify how much of the shoreline was disturbed, natural, and from there. What they found out is 49% of the shoreline had disturbed shoreline and disturbed upland habitats. So look at the map on the right. As you would think, most of that shoreline has some kind of disturbance to it. The orangish color is 15% has undisturbed shoreline, but the upland was disturbed. So not a lot, but it's still more than we'd like to see. The yellow is undisturbed shoreline with light ag impacts. And if you kind of give you a little background behind, I'll go one more slide, one more note here. And then 24% is undisturbed shoreline and upland. So they're both undisturbed, which is where we want to be. A couple of things to note here is you look at 12% is with the light ag impact. That's predominantly all in the very north end of the lake. And there's not a lot of homer development on that section of the property. All the rest of the around the lake is starting to become developed, except for when you look at the large portion of the 24% of undisturbed shoreline and upland is down in that southeast corner of the lake. And that's where we predominantly have, it's a state park in that area. So the rest is where there's some developments going on, and that's what we're trying to fix. That's kind of where we get to the numbers and how much we're trying to do, and we're trying to help. One thing to note here that is a help is that Dade County, which is the county that Pickerel Lake is located in, on their zoning board, they have a 40-foot setback already set up. So which is nice, and they have on that, anytime there's a variance, so anytime a homeowner or cabin owner wants to come in and do work on the property on the shoreline, they have to put in a variance permit. And two of the places that it has to go is the Conservancy gets to see it, as well as the department gets to see it, and we get to help guide what's going on. So not necessarily that we're going to deny that or have an influence on denying it, but it at least gets our eyes on it, and we can start working with that homeowner to get things set up more beneficial to the water body. We had these signs developed for this project, and I regret that we were missing a couple of our stickers on this sign when this picture was taken. We do have stickers that go on as a partner for the Midwest Glacial Lake Partnership. That needs to go on here as well. This picture we have, it shows the neat aspect of this sign. It looks just like a home for sale property sign. So when you put these signs out on a project, it catches the attention of passerbys and neighbors and stuff. They see it and they think, oh, so-and-so must be looking to sell their property. So it'll start the conversation. They go in and talk to them, and they're like, no, and that homeowner tells them, no, we're signed up in this restoration project, and and it gets that conversation started. So it's twofold. It helps tell people what's going on, and it helps stimulate conversation. The Pickerel Lake project specifically started in shoreline restoration in 2017. We applied for the grant in 2018, was awarded the funding in 19, and it was fully funded in 20, so we really kicked things off. Up to date, we have 25 projects that have completed, and we've protected about halfway to our goal, about 1,200 linear feet of shoreline. Average depth of that shoreline is 17 feet wide. As we mentioned, we try to hit that 30-foot buffer length or width, but not all properties, as we'll see, have that ability to get there. And we've protected about 811 square feet of property per property. So we're making good strides. This map here just kind of shows you where around the lake each one of those properties is. And if you kind of can remember back a couple slides ago to where those red areas are on that map, most of these fall right into those red areas. As I mentioned, we started in 17 with one landowner. We had one in 18 that signed up a full project. In 19, when the word got out there, we had applied for the grant and conversation was started. We got 4 more to sign up and got completed. Then when we got funding, it really took off. We got 12 landowners to participate in 20, 7 fully participated in 21, and we're working on 12 more for 2022 here. And they're all in various stages of looking to participate. A couple of things, it doesn't add up to 25 on here, but a couple of them are you get up into that northwest corner, there's 6 of them, but the dots don't really show up because they're kind of overlapped. You can imagine these properties are right on top of each other. We get that down in that southwest corner. There's 6 of them kind of all lined up together, and it's hard to delineate them out on a map. Next, we'll go into a few of the specific projects to kind of show you some of the examples of how this works and what it looks like. Here's one of we're going to have a number of pictures of this Osmondson property. It was done in 2020 with the grant. Kind of a neat thing is this one was put in. There's a second edition of the Shoreline Living magazine coming out, and this one was one that's participating in that publication coming out. But here's some examples of what the property looked like beforehand. You can see off their deck, there's not a lot of shoreline there to protect, but you can see right in the left picture, the bottom there, you can see that how the erosion, wind and waves are having an erosion. They're losing a lot of their shoreline. And the picture on the right is kind of a downward picture looking at when that water is higher, how it's encroaching up on their property, brings up a lot of debris. They're having extra maintenance to clean up their walk path and whatnot. So you can see, it'll be fun. It'll be interesting to show you the transformation of this property in a year's time. We had to do a little extra work, as I mentioned, the erosion that was taking place right up along the deck, below the deck here. So we stabilized that to help also protect the plantings and get them established from the higher water and the wind and wave action. So that's what was happening here. Some of the area was killed off that needed to be. And both these pictures, just a couple different views looking at this property. And then here's the left picture is looking at the end of 2020 and what it looks like this summer in 2021. So a pretty rapid transformation. A neat aspect with this project is Rhet was a little bit skeptical when this one was going to happen, because this was a mid-July or early July planting. It was like 94 degrees, I believe you mentioned, at like 10 o'clock in the morning. Probably not the prime optimal day to be planting, but it was the day that worked with everything, all factors, and it was a phenomenal turnout. Here's just another view. Bottom right picture is Mr. Osmondson himself. Very happy and a very good ally to have. He talks a lot about it and will be on our side to anybody that has questions about it. And then the top left is just a picture on this last summer, looking from the lake towards his property and what you get. Turned out beautifully in just a year's time. Here's another property that was just done in 2021. As I mentioned, this kind of shows and illustrates a couple of features here. As well as the last property did, not all these properties have that 30-foot wide buffer that we can get to. So we work and protect what we can get. Both of these didn't have that 30-foot wide. So, we get what we can get, but that bottom, you can see the top pictures after it was killed, bottom pictures when they're planting. Look at the grade that's helping protect it from erosion. You got that rain or any moisture that comes off the roof of the house will go right down and can really be susceptible to eroding the shoreline there. You can really illustrates it with the planting party that's going into there. Here's just later on in the summer. That was after the planting was done and those plants are starting to take hold and starting to grow. It'd be interesting to see some pictures this summer to how that transpires. Here's another neat property, or actually 3 properties. There's 3 properties together, and I think this one might have been I don't know if it was in the northwest corner or the southwest corner. It's one of those groupings. This is 3 homeowners together, so we have 300 linear feet of property, all protected by these 3 homeowners together going. You can see they're a little bit higher bank property, so they have a rock riprap already, but there's still a lot of benefit to getting these in there. It helps stabilize that riprap up top, doesn't allow that erosion into the property. It stops those nutrients from adding into there. And it was a good section of, as I mentioned, 300 linear feet all in 3 properties. Here's another dual property together, 2 landowners right side by side, kind of the same as the last one. They got the rock riprap up top. You can see between the two from the left picture is early spring, and by end of the summer, got some really good take and growth on this project. Here's 2 more, just showing some different examples of what some of the properties will look like. Jones property, and it was a 2019 when it was first done. They kept a little walk path to get down, and kind of mixed it into a natural shoreline around what their existing landscaping was. And also another one on the right, the Stewart property, you know, just a little area in there, but the steep shoreline that this is kind of what it looked like prior. Don't have any pictures of it after, but you know, it kind of gives you another illustration of what we're trying to protect out there. That kind of summarizes the presentation. You know, just kind of this last slide before we open it up for questions is, you know, as I mentioned, it's great for groups. You get a lot of buy-in in groups of all ages and experience levels that can participate. So that we'll open it up for any questions.
Thanks, Jason. That's really interesting stuff. And yeah, fascinating. I have a ton of questions I've been keeping track here myself. But it looks like folks, I see 12 questions that folks from the webinar have asked. So I'll make sure we get to those as well. Again, just for the folks on the webinar, if you go onto the, hover your mouse over the screen, go to the bottom, there's a Q&A button. You can submit your questions there and we'll try to answer them as we go through here. So first question, you know, I noticed that you guys are using mulch as the primary way to stabilize that soil in the short term. And one question was, do you have any thoughts or comment on the common use of non-biodegradable filter fabrics or erosion control fabrics, you know, plastic basically, versus the biodegradable products or small stone, or in this case, I think, you know, you guys use a lot of mulch.
Yeah, I can answer that, Joe. Thanks to Rhet Russell. I've sweated in most of these plants on these projects, so I'll answer that. You know, the overall goal with this, with the mulch is twofold. One, it's to keep invasives down a little bit until the natives get established. So keep the Kentucky bluegrass from coming back, and then providing some type of a wet material there for the plants to draw some moisture from, because we are out on the prairie and sometimes watering is not always an option. So I've stayed away from plastic and that type of stuff, basically because I want these plants to all intermix and root together and actually spread and fill in all the voids. And I felt that some of these plastics might prohibit that early on in development. So plus I've got a pretty good supply, or readily available supply of mulch that is basically low cost, or, you know, a lot of it is to give away from some tree services in the city here. And so availability of product and cost of product to keep costs down, the mulch was the best way I felt to go.
Gotcha. Do you guys have any ever issues with that mulch kind of eroding down the shoreline itself on some of those steeper banks?
At times we have, but if I have a steep bank like that, we'll put in some wattles and some other control measures if we feel we need to. Yeah, each site is different and site specific, but we do have sites that are fairly steep that we have put wattles in to try to keep that from running down the hillside until they're established. So
yeah, I think that brings up another good point that we've seen, at least here in Michigan. I hear from others is, you know, like you said, no site's different, and it's really helpful to consult with folks who have done this before, because it's sometimes hard to apply a cookie cutter plan to every different property. Did you guys plant into the riprap as well?
There's times where if it's not, a lot of riprap in South Dakota is backed by the fabric, but if we have some voids and stuff in there where we can get some creeping, some of the vines and some of that other stuff that likes to try to make its own path, I shove them in there at times, just more out of a curiosity than part of the project out of anything. But yeah, there are some times where I'll try to punch something in there without trying to expose the fabric for the riprap as best that I can, because as we know, it's the light is what really breaks that fabric down. And for riprap, it's kind of twofold. We need that backing there to hold the soil best that we can.
Sure. One of the things that we've noticed, I think in Michigan, it's something like every 7 years on average, a shoreline property turns over. And I don't know what it is for South Dakota, but I'm guessing that you guys have a fair amount of turnover on properties. So do you have any kind of contracts or length of times that the projects have to stay in place, or what's your experience been with kind of having properties being sold or otherwise going back on the installations?
We've had a couple properties sell. I think a couple down on Ponset. Some properties have sold, and once they find out the reasoning behind the project, most of the prospective buyers are willing to maintain that. What you'll notice at Pickerel Lake is most of these are generational cabins. They're not going anywhere. They might have some remodels done from future generations on down, but very little turnover on shoreline property on Pickerel Lake in particular. It's most of the families that have been up there for 6, 7, 8, 9 decades. So very, very little turnover on property ownership on Pickerel Lake.
Yeah, okay. The next question is how much ice push do you guys have, and how much is that a problem in terms of establishing and affecting these shorelines, especially early on in the process? And do you guys have to use any kind of hardening, rock riprap toes or that sort of a strategy?
Right. So most of the time when we're recommending a shoreline stabilization project with riprap, toe rock is necessary on most of our glaciated lakes up here in the Northeast. Just for example, we've got 15 buckled boat ramps right now that the ice has receded for the season. So we do get a major ice push. Most of our ice in the Pickerel Lake region will touch 30 inches of ice. And so you can imagine what that, with pressure systems, what that pressure puts on that property. So typically toe rock in so that it delineates that energy and pushes up and over. And if it gets up into the impact area of the plants, overall concept to me is the rooting action should hold. And yeah, we're going to have some superficial stuff to look at to start with, but the root system is there and established. It should reestablish itself just fine. So.
Haven't you had a couple instances, Rhet, where you some of the early projects like down at Camp Pesca by Watertown, where it's gone through some flooding, some ice events, and also fire, and they've responded and bounced back?
Right, and a couple of the projects on Camp Pesca that I have going on now is because the neighbor had that buffer strip, and they have seen how it survived the ice push and the flooding events, and so they're kind of at one point they thought their neighbor was crazy for putting this in, and now they're realizing that maybe they're the crazy ones.
Yeah, that actually touches on a question that I had. One of the things that you guys mentioned was that you had a couple of areas where neighbors bound together and did a project all in one fell swoop. And you mentioned the signage that you're using to kind of advertise it when these things were going in. And I was curious, just anecdotally, how much you saw of neighbors talking to neighbors and how much that peer-to-peer marketing and conversation had to do with ensuing shoreline properties registering in the program.
I'm kind of relying on that as a driving force for this. And when you look at that map and you see all those pinpoints, it was probably one strategic pinpoint that started as, and it spread into the 4 or 5 adjoining. And that's the case on Camp Pesca and Lake Cochran and a couple other lakes as well. So what I've noticed is when the Joneses are doing it, maybe we should be doing it. And the Pickerel Lake is really, that's why we strategically picked quadrants, because we thought it might go that way, and it really has. And the overall goal would be, like Jason say, if we could hit that 10%, maybe it'll start filling in on its own, itself, because people just get used to the new normal, and if this landowner's been happy with it, why wouldn't I be happy with it? And yeah, and then it's that domino effect that goes down the shoreline, because in all reality, that shoreline just gets stronger and stronger with connectivity if we can get it connected for bigger stretches. So
Yeah, for sure. That's great. All right, I'm going to keep rolling through these questions here. We got a bunch of them. So you mentioned that you guys end up having to kill off weeds and some undesirable plants along the shoreline. Kentucky bluegrass is one of the main ones. Do you guys see reed, canary grass, or other invasives that you end up having to deal with a lot? There's a second part to the question, but we'll deal with this one first.
yeah, reed canary is a tough one. It's hard to control, but the overall goal is trying to find something that'll compete it, and that takes a lot of work, and you gotta stay on top of it. But there are a couple places on Pickerel where we battled that, and it seems like about the third or fourth year, you can maybe get over the hump on some of that stuff and start getting some more of the desirables in that area. So yeah, there's certain species, in all reality, the bluegrass likes to creep in a little bit. If you don't have that defined boundary, we typically leave it up to the landowner on what he wants for edging. They don't have to have edging, but I always remind them that it's pretty easy to delineate this line with edging, and we can keep the bluegrass right at bay. And, and I'm trying to get them to clip it, go in the opposite direction, or bag it right next to there, and not spread that stuff into the planting area until it's established. But yeah, the first 2-3 seasons, it's like having a garden. Yeah, there's some work involved. So
yeah, for sure. I noted that too. I think that edging is really neat, and that's something I don't see provided for in a lot of shoreline restoration programs that I've seen. So I think that's kind of a unique function, and we've seen, at least with a lot of our restorations here in Michigan, that it can be kind of hard when you're running the mower to know where it ends. And, you can't go backwards. You mow off an extra inch here, and 3 weeks later, you accidentally get another inch, and all of a sudden you've nibbled away at what you used to have planted in the native plants.
Right. And, that's getting the landowner to help you while you're planting is critical to this, because they start to learn and identify stuff. It's almost funny how at the beginning of the day, they think they know nothing about it. And by the end of the day, they're almost not looking at the plant labels anymore. They're identifying them themselves and putting them in the spots that they would like to see them. The other thing that I do with these projects is I give them their plant list. And with that plant list, I have a 1-page specific sheet on each one of them plants on its benefits and what it's going to look like later on, and the flowering time periods and colors and that kind of stuff. So they can kind of go out and use this as a master manual and say, do I pick this or do I not pick this? The other good thing that is most of these people, once they put the sweat equity into putting these in the ground, they definitely don't want to pull the wrong thing. And so a lot of them, in today's age, is pretty easy. Snap a picture, send it to Rhet, and we'll see if we got a problem here that we need to pull, or this is a good thing going on. So
sounds good. There's 48 people on this webinar that want to start sending you pictures. The second part of the question was and this, another person was interested in this too. You guys mentioned that you're using glyphosate products, typically rodeo, Roundup. Are you having success with those with reed canary grass, at least initially? I know you talked about competition in the long term. Are you having success with those, and do you have any pros and cons you want to discuss with those products?
Yeah, so for bluegrass, it's really easy to control that with those chemicals. But for reed canary, what I found is knocking it back with the weed whip first, letting it regrow a little bit, and then hitting it with the chemical has been a little more successful than just trying trying to take old growth and controlling that with chemical. And like Jason said, we have had a few shorelines where the landowner didn't want to use chemical, and we used fabric, tree plastic basically, and choked it out with heat and lack of moisture, you know. So but there are options there, but yeah, what I've noticed is if cattails is another one, not that cattails are all negative, but there's some areas where you maybe don't want the cattail look and you want something else. What I've noticed is knocking down that old growth and attacking the new growth. Takes a little longer to get the project done, but you're gonna have more success rate if you're doing that. So
Yeah, makes sense. Do you guys have any ballpark figures for how much these projects are costing, you know, per square foot or linear foot?
well, if you don't want to look at any labor, the figure I use is about $3.50 a square foot.
You know what it'd be with labor?
With my labor or somebody that makes a lot of money for a living.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you know, it's hard to estimate labor because everybody's location is going to be different, and you know, if you look at the top left-hand corner there, my labor sources, maybe I'm not supposed to use that as a labor source, the child laborers, but they really love it. And so I call it a labor of love, really. The labor part of it, I really don't factor into the project that much because the benefits far outweigh what this labor is costing us. So.
Sure. All right. Do you guys ever have any issues with browse from animals, whether it's geese or deer or others?
Yeah, I've had to use some fencing in some areas, temporary fencing. Like out the Redland Art Center here, we've got a project, and it's a popular area for Canada geese, and so we've had to use some flagging techniques and some owl decoys and electric fence in some strategic areas for the three biggest culprits would be, you know, pickerel turkeys like to scratch through that mulch. They really like to pick through that mulch, and typically they're leaving the plants alone, but they're exposing a lot of what we don't want exposed at the time. And deer can get into these things pretty good. If we're in a heavy deer area, I will pick species that they maybe don't like quite so much. But I haven't found anything that a Canada goose won't eat. So those are the tricky ones. And you're right next to water. And if you have a shallow shoreline moving up, yeah, you can plan on battling them a little bit. Having a good yippy little yard dog maybe helps in some of these situations. So.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. All right, a couple questions about you know, kind of the proper shoreline that existed previously. So first, are sandy beaches, are they ever allowed? You know, if you guys had, if there was a situation where there was naturally a sandy beach at that location, would you keep it then in that case?
So yeah, in South Dakota, you know, sand beaches either naturally occur or they don't, and we can't create them here. So everybody wants a nice sandy beach along their shorefront, and as most of us professionals know, you know, those are back in bays typically when the wind energy is diverting and it's dumping its load on that shallower shoreline. We don't allow you to dump sand on the shoreline in South Dakota. If you want a sandy shore area, you have to put it above the ordinary high water mark and prove to us that you can contain it, that it can't get back into the lake. Because, like I said, we either have naturally occurring sand in South Dakota or we don't have any at all. There's not really much in between on our lakes. And if you try to manipulate that shoreline, Mother Nature is going to pull it off of that shoreline and reclaim what she wants. And it's just basically sediment at that point. So.
And how about seawalls in the projects you've done? Have you removed any seawalls?
Yeah, we have had a couple projects where, you know, they had the old mortared together, cobbled seawall from the 30s, which was the popular thing to do on Pickerel Lake, where we have taken some of them out. That was at the landowner's expense, was to take some of that out because it was failing or it had failed and they wanted to fix it. And that's how some of these conversations start. They may start off as, hey, I'd like to repair my seawall. And in the end, we're walking out there and the guy's going, well, I guess I need to tear it completely out and work at a more natural landscaping type of because we have that huge ice push. So anything vertical in South Dakota is a target. It really is. If you put anything vertical on our shorelines, you're asking for future trouble.
Do you guys have a goal in terms of the slope that you're looking for? 3 to 1 or 4 to 1?
You know, I don't really look at the slope so much as to but if we were recommending a riprap shoreline, a riprap rock, we want to go 3 to 1.
Yeah. Okay.
And toe rock that in good at the base. So.
What are some of the biggest hurdles that people have to overcome when they decide to join? Do you have typical issues that you have to talk people through?
Yeah, you know what I've noticed is sometimes it's generational. Like up at Pickerel Lake, Grandpa's been mowing the shoreline like this, you know, for 60 years now, and he likes to mow, and it's always been this way, and you know, so we tackle some of that stuff, and some. I'm a golfer myself, but so some people like the manicured golf course type of a look. That's just what they like, and you know, and so we got some of them battles, and we're not going to win all those battles, and it's not for everybody. But like I said earlier, what I found is there's some peer pressure there from neighbor to neighbor that I'll just give you an example on Pickerel. If you do one of these on a multi-million-dollar dwelling or cabin, pretty soon somebody's like, well, if they can do it there at that piece of property, we should be doing it here at ours, you know. And so I rely on that local peer pressure as much as I can to get it done. And that's what's great about Pickerel Lake Conservancy is you know, almost everybody on that board is very, very conservative minded and wants to do the right thing for the lake. They're all deep rooted families that have been there for a long, long time and realize that it's a lot easier to wreck a lake than it is to fix a lake. But if we can start fixing it, the little piece here and there, that's what we should be doing. So.
Yeah, that's great. All right, I'm just looking at the time here. We're starting to run out of time. We have a number of questions still. So I think what I'll do at this point is recognizing that there's probably going to be some people hop off. I do want to take the chance to thank you guys. We'll wrap this up briefly, and then we'll hang around and answer a few more remaining questions. But for those that do have to hop off at the top of the hour, I want to say, you know, thanks to Jason and Rhet. Really appreciate you guys sharing your knowledge and experience on this. If you have to hop off, or if you want to share this webinar with folks or see the end of it, I will be emailing everybody that registered for it with a link to the video when we post it. So you'll have an opportunity to catch up on it if you want to see the rest of the questions get answered. And I would encourage folks to tune into the next webinar. The MGLP's next webinar is April 12th, where Travis Tulitsky and Keita Sheehan are going to talk about the Wisconsin Shoreline Stabilization Outreach Project. So, you know, pretty related to this one and complements it well with some outreach materials that they've put together. So a plug for that.
One thing I forgot to put on here, Joe, is our contact for either mine or Rhet to this presentation. Can we get that to you and put it out there so people can get it if they need to or want to?
Yes, certainly. So I will CC you two on the email that I share the webinar link when it's posted to YouTube. and folks will have the opportunity to follow up with you guys if you have any questions at that point. So
Sounds good. Thank you.
yeah. All right. So I'm going to keep rolling with the questions then. Thank you guys. And okay, so let's see. A couple questions on kind of how you guys did things. So is the protocol that you used for assessing the Pickerel Lake shorelines, was that published or is that available somehow? Do you guys have any documentation on that?
Yeah, you can go to the Pickerel Lake Conservancy website, and it's a study done by the Northeast Glacial Lakes, the Conservation District. And there's a whole, I don't know, it's probably 30, 40 pages long on how they evaluated those shorelines. So, and I could also get you a link to that, Joe, if you need it. So
That'd be great. Yeah, we'll make sure to share that with everyone. And similarly, would you guys be willing to share the criteria and the checklist for how shorelines were assessed? I think that's the same question that they're asking there, but I want to make sure if you guys had any checklists or criteria that you used with your restorations.
right.
You know, we want to make sure we've done this, the kind of steps, or if you had documentation, if you'd be willing to share that as well, that might be helpful.
Right. You know, on each site, I do a specific site visit and do some measuring and you know, percentage of slope and direction, facing direction and soil samples, that kind of stuff. So, you know, I kind of do a site evaluation at each specific location, and then work with the landowner on how wide they think they would be willing to go with the buffer strip. So yeah, we're, like I said, what's crazy is just a couple houses down, you might be dealing with completely different soil structures. So that makes a big difference on what we plant.
For sure. We did have a question about, does Michigan have a shoreline restoration process, and how do people start? And if you guys are okay with that, I might just take a quick crack at that one. Unless you're familiar with Michigan. You know, in Michigan, we don't have a statewide program that does this work, but we do have lots of opportunities to do this sort of work if you were interested. So the Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership is a partnership. You can check their website, and there you can find all sorts of resources on restoring natural shorelines. And I see Eric just put the link in the chat there. So that's an opportunity to learn more about it. And on that website, there's a list of contractors that have undergone training to install bioengineered shorelines like the ones we're seeing here today. So there is an opportunity if you want to go that route. There's some contractors that can help you go that route. The other thing is to reach out to the conservation groups in your area, whether that's a conservation district or sometimes the watershed councils. Those types of groups will often have some of those resources. And really, I suppose this answer kind of applies, you know, more broadly across the MGLP. If you're in Iowa or Wisconsin or wherever you are, you know, reaching out, if you have questions about this, reaching out to conservation districts, watershed councils, fisheries biologists. If they got a call from somebody wanting to do a natural shoreline, they'd be probably pretty excited to try to help you make that work. We had a question on who picks up the costs in these programs. I think you guys kind of answered that with the grants that you covered. It sounds like the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership, and then some funding from the state. And then I don't believe I remember a landowner match unless they wanted to kind of upgrade it and bring in their own.
Yeah,
Is that right?
Go ahead.
it's more of a labor source for them, you know, in the continued maintenance agreement to make sure it turns out. So that's the other thing I failed to mention too a little bit is there are times where we got to go back and replant, you know, a species didn't turn out, but something else really liked the area. So we adjust on the next year and fill in a few voids, because obviously you don't always get the 100% success rate on those plants. There's times where a certain species we thought would do well just didn't, and we got to adjust accordingly, or maybe send a soil sample in and see what's going on. So,
Do you guys have particular species that work well for outcompeting reed canary grass?
oh, not. It would all be depend on, of course, reed canary only shows up on certain sites, but verdict is still out on that, Joe. I'd say a little bit. The two areas that we were battling reed canary the most were new plantings this fall, and we'll see how that does. So
Okay, they should check back with you, it sounds like.
sure, yeah.
Do you guys have any issues with poison ivy in the beds? If so, how do you control that?
There's some areas on Pickerel Lake that has some poison ivy, but you got to remember most of this is on private property, and they've probably pounded that stuff down the best that they can beforehand. And I'm not very susceptible to poison ivy, so I don't look for it real close because I don't worry about it too much. But I wouldn't say that we have too many issues with poison ivy or poison oak.
All right, are you guys doing any of this type of work on streams as well, or is this just a lakes program?
No, it's available for streams as well. We did do a project here on the Big Sioux River here in town, in Watertown. That was a highly erodible site that some street runoff was coming down and eroding it, and that's that bottom picture on this questions actually is that site location. You notice there next to the water, there is a gabion box of rock there that you wouldn't be able to hardly find right now after it's been 4 or 5 years since we did that project, and plant materials taking it over, and the rock did a good job of the actual embankment erosion, and then we kind of hid it and protected it with some more riparian buffers. So
Okay. And this question was asked a little bit earlier in the presentation. It seems like, so the question is, describe the typical contractors that are performing these shoreline restoration projects, and do more and more have special training or certifications. And it sounds like the lead contractor is you, Rhet.
right.
So
Right. Yeah.
you want to talk about a little bit about what your qualifications are? Maybe if folks are looking for somebody to help them, what they might look for in a contractor.
To be honest with you, I rely heavily on nursery knowledge for native plants in certain areas. And it's been a lot of homeschooling, to tell you the truth. I've read a lot of books. I've studied a lot. I rely on our habitat and access, or our habitat staff, our terrestrial staff here with Game Fish and Parks, and so yeah, there are a lot of nurseries that are starting to pop up that are specialized in more of this native landscaping stuff, because I think they can see the change in the trends a little bit, maybe. The nice thing about this is, you gotta plant the petunia every year to get it to come back, and this stuff is coming back on its own, and so it's a little bit less work once you get it established. You can get the same colors. I look at these as giant pollinator plots as well too. So what I focus on is trying to find a bloom period from start to stop. So, we don't have a real super long growing season in South Dakota, but if we can get some color on the landscape from early May to end of October, middle of November, that's what I'm looking for. So
You guys have, as you're installing these, have you had issues with folks maybe on shallower or flatter sloped properties losing visibility to their lake and having concerns about that, either from the perspective of watching swimming activities, maybe with grandkids, or just their view shed in general?
right, and so what I've done is I've manipulated those views a little bit with the plantings, knowing that, hey, on this end maybe we want to block out the neighbor's shed, so I can use some blue stem and some taller species, and we can kind of keep them in check over there. And if they start spreading aggressively, we can knock them back a bit. But there are different walking path areas where we put some species that don't mind being trampled and stepped on quite so much. You might, I might put some prairie drop seed or some grama and some other stuff along walkways, so that, hey, this stuff gets trampled on, it just survives, and it doesn't get super tall, so we can still see the area that we need to get to. So yeah, I work with those landowners the best that I can to keep views and to hide views at times. So there are times where they want to hide a view of something, or we stock our wood pile for our burn pit over here. Is any way you can hide it in this planting? And there's ways that we can do stuff like that. So
Yeah, sounds good. All right, last question that I've got here is just kind of a quick one. You showed some pictures of some pretty huge houses on lakefronts in South Dakota at the outset, and where were those at? We're not looking to give anybody's names away here, obviously, but
yeah.
Generally, where are they?
Well, we got a lot of large places on Pickerel Lake, down in the southeast corner of the state, like Wall Lake, and some of them others have large house developments.
Lake Mitchell.
Compesca has some large. Lake Mitchell has some large. Seems like people don't build the little small cabins anymore. They're fairly significant when they're built or they're added on to. So we have a lot of water up here in the Northeast, and it's not all glaciated. A lot of it's not meandered and some other stuff, but on these established lakes with developments, you don't see small stuff going in anymore. So
yeah, expensive property begets expensive houses.
Yep, and we noticed an influx with COVID on the demand for lakeshore property as well. So
Sure. All right, well, you guys have successfully passed the lightning round of questions. I appreciate you hanging in there. I think the questions really indicate the amount of interest in this project, which is high. So thank you for taking the time to answer the questions. Really appreciate it, and of course to share your presentation and your experiences with us as well. So at this point, I think I'll wrap things up here. I don't see anything else. Thank you guys, and for those that are on the webinar, again, I'd encourage you to check out the remaining webinars. We've got one on shoreline outreach and stabilization documents, the tribal climate adaptation menu, and on wakeboat waves study out of Minnesota. So some good stuff, variety of different types of talks worth checking out on our website. And you'll see an email from me with some follow-ups on some documents from Jason and Rhet, as well as their contacts and a link to this video if you want to share it with others. So with that, thank you guys, and we will wrap up for today. Have a good day, everyone.